Hello, everyone, and welcome into CrushTheStreet.com. You know, we were just having a dynamic pre-interview here with the one and only Node Investor. Excellent, amazing YouTube channel, tons of cryptocurrency content. If you want to stay up to speed with what's going on in crypto, definitely follow him on his YouTube channel. But man, I just had to hit record here. We are having a great discussion about what is going on in the space, the psychology around markets and cryptocurrency, and maybe why a lot of people have missed the boat because they've had these altruistic arguments of Bitcoin not being backed by anything physical and refusing to understand the value that is in the network. Maybe it's more of a 21st century understanding that there's value in a network. So we're going to discuss the nature of this and just what's going on in the markets at the moment. Node Investor, thanks for coming on Crush the Street with me today.
Hey, what's up, Kenneth? Always a pleasure.
Well, you know what? I just had a conversation. I have not posted it yet. It'll probably be posted by the time I post this interview with somebody who is very anti-Bitcoin, completely disparaging it, saying, you know, how he called the top in Bitcoin, but he never got anyone into it at a good price. It was always a bubble. And I guess why have people been so blind to just coming around to the idea that this is possibly a huge revolution to the current system that we have?
Yeah, and I'm a huge believer that it is a huge revolution, and it's going to go way beyond just affecting the way we deal with money. Just the whole blockchain technology and the decentralized ledger and everything that it's going to enable, we can't even begin to imagine. It'd be like trying to forecast what the internet of today looks like in the early 90s. I mean, who would have thought, right? Streaming and always connected and smartphones and just the things we have now. But there is a resistance, for whatever reason, from those that don't understand it from an investment perspective. And you see it, I know your audience has a lot of diehard metals and gold bugs, and I am a big fan of the precious metals, but I was certainly open to things like cryptocurrency a couple of years ago, and I'm glad I was. But you continue to see this resistance against this change that we're going through right now.
Yeah, so you basically, from a fundamental perspective, you anticipated that in cryptocurrency, it was going to grow and there were going to be more buyers than there were sellers. When it's all said and done, that's what you anticipated.
Yeah, I mean, and so I have a technical background, and when I got into it, right, it was kind of the perfect combination of my passions for finance and investing and the technology that I saw behind it. And it was kind of one of those epiphany moments where I thought, wow, like this is huge. And I barely even understand the top of this thing, right? And yeah, it was one of those things where I was starting to tell a lot of my investment buddies, hey, look at Bitcoin and buy this. And I continue to get that weird look like, what? Like you're actually buying that stuff, man? And, it wasn't until late last year that a lot of those guys started to come around. But what's interesting is the ones that were very against it, they kind of just got quiet and they said no, because they were telling me, oh, it's a bubble, it's a bubble, it's a bubble. And I think the last time I was on this show was $1,200 Bitcoin or something. And you asked me, is it too late to get in? I said, no, I don't think it is. Little did I know we'd hit 20K before the end of the year.
Wow. But yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you've been one of the people among others who have come on this show and encouraged us and encouraged the audience to get it and be part of this. And it said, hey, don't be afraid of what was seemingly a high price last year, and get into this, be a part of this. And here we are. I mean, obviously we've seen a correction in the price. It's come down from 20,000, and it's hurt if you have purchased a large amount of crypto in the last little bit and have watched it collapse by, maybe 50% or less, depending on where you got in. But yeah, maybe, I want to kind of get back and forth to what we were talking about before, but let's touch on that right now. What are your thoughts right now with the correction that we've seen in crypto?
So there's a couple of things to keep in mind. One is markets go through these very big macro cycles, and after every huge run up, we have a pretty good correction, and then eventually it finds a floor and bases out, and we start a new accumulation phase, and then we start another stealth bull run, and then kind of the mainstream bull run, and those always culminate in this kind of climactic blow off top that then kind of resets the stage, but it always ends up higher than it was before. And you got to keep in mind, I mean, we're kind of talking about when I was on the last time on your show here, it was $1,000 and everybody was already getting excited. Wow, look at how far we've come. And from that point up, it wasn't until October that we finally broke 5K. And that's kind of hard to think about. It was only October when we broke 5K for the first time. And from that point on, over the next 2 months, I mean, we went parabolic, right? We went from 5K to 20K in a very short period of time and very quickly. And the money was easy, and the altcoins did even more, right? And I mean, counts were doubling in a couple of weeks. And so it was pretty wild. Certainly the sentiment was there. You're seeing CNBC do articles on how to buy Ripple at $3, and just the type of exuberance we saw, the frothiness of the market, we were due. There was no doubt we were due. The question was, how low would we ultimately go? And so we saw that pullback, and once we broke support around 10K, it was a big psychological number, and we accelerated down, seeing that 6K number finally get hit early last week. And so here we are bouncing. Now, do I think we're going to go straight to the moon from here? I do not. But that was a pretty good intermediate low from all standards. Just the volume, the climactic moved down at the low. The extreme bearishness I saw, it was only after we were at 7K and 6K that I started hearing a lot of people saying, hey, this thing's going to 1,200, this thing's going to 2,000. And it's like, okay, right? I mean, we just had this 70% drop, and now you're calling for this collapse, right? So the bearishness is still there, and rightly so. I mean, we've all been feeling the pain, but I believe that we're going to find a floor in and around these levels. Could it go a little bit lower? It sure could. And the low end that I'm looking at is probably that 5K mark if it continues to drop. But sure, we'll hit a new base and start a new accumulation pattern from which we start to head higher over the long term.
Is it possible that Bitcoin, and this is getting back to that altruistic versus in one direction or another, is it possible that Bitcoin is still experimental and that, we do have something else that comes and replaces it, and the network goes from Bitcoin to another form of currency? I mean, I guess years and years and years down the line, that's ultimately going to happen. I'm pretty confident in saying that in 1,000 years, there might be something else that takes over for Bitcoin. But I mean, sooner rather than later, is it possible that we have something that large portions of the network jump over to?
So there's a couple of dynamics there, right? Is the biggest challenge has been the scalability and the transaction ability of Bitcoin. And there's no doubt, right? High fees and all that. We've seen a shift to things like Litecoin here recently. But as far as Bitcoin being kind of the quote unquote reserve currency of the crypto world, unless we see some very heavy-handed regulation, I expect that it will maintain that place for quite some time. I think Bitcoin is kind of it's the backbone of the crypto world, and you see, even in trading and exchanges, this just is back and forth between Bitcoin and other altcoins. But from a usability perspective, it's certainly not as easy as some of the other names. And so I think there's room for competition. But just the fact that it was the early adopter, if they continue to make improvements on, Lightning Network and that sort of thing, and we start to see more adoption on that, it'll just kind of further strengthen the case for Bitcoin sticking around long term. But from a regulation perspective, one thing you got to keep in mind is central banks, governments, they're all going to start coming out with their own crypto. And depending on how much they force the use of their own currency, or even maybe ban the use of other currencies like Bitcoin, right, we could see some impact there.
Yes. One of the things that we've seen, of course, is China and South Korea come down hard. I mean, the crackdown on crypto in many ways, but we see it pop up elsewhere. Japan is becoming the largest crypto market, and it just shifts. And I feel like in many ways, there's certain governments out there that understand that this cannot be fought. And if you want to be ahead of it and want to benefit from the hundreds of millions and billions and trillions of dollars that are going to come in from cryptocurrency, they need to start partnering with it rather than coming down hard against it.
I couldn't have said it better. Yes. And that's what you've seen with like the internet, for example, right? Those economies, those governments, the cultures that embraced the technological change and the open communication and the innovation that it spun have done the best versus those that have been very hard-lined about clamping down on open communication and such, right? And we've seen revolutions in those countries. And so you're seeing very much the same aspect with blockchain technology, with cryptocurrency, and those countries and governments that begin to embrace this and say, hey, how can we use this for the benefit of more versus trying to keep it hush-hush, because it's too late at this point. This one's, crypto's, it's out of the box. It ain't going to go away. It's just a matter of who's going to embrace it and who isn't.
Right. One thing I wanted to touch on is the bearishness that we might see. And it's something that I definitely was asking questions about as we started to go into those really high numbers. I mean, it was getting crazy, day after day, thousands of dollars, almost like a blow off top. And you had a lot of those stereotypical type top indicators, like your taxi cab drivers and Uber drivers talking about it, and gardeners and landscapers, and I mean, nothing against these people, but it's just your stereotypical non-financial people starting to talk about this cryptocurrency, and sure enough, it correlated with the top. At the most current top, I should say.
Sure.
So it moved up very quickly, but it collapsed and corrected even quicker, and that's the nature of markets. And the thing about bear markets is they can be gut-wrenching. And as people start to panic and sell off, that perpetuates more panicking and more selling off, because nobody wants to be left holding the bag. And it can cause a market to go much lower than anyone would have thought possible. And I guess my question for you is, how bad could this quote-unquote bear market get?
Sure. And the thing with bear markets is they, just like bull markets tend to surprise to the upside, bears tend to surprise to the downside, right? And I mean, even just a month ago, coming into the new year, there was just so much exuberance still. Nobody would have been able to guess, hey, this thing's going down to sub 6K for a little bit, right? That would have been a really scary thought. And the reality is, and I've been very open about this, is it might not be over, right? And it could last longer. The fact that this correction is only 8 weeks old is a very young correction, right? It's very short in time frame relative to others. Now, we did have a bear market in 2014 and 15 in Bitcoin. I do not believe we're going to see the magnitude of bear market we saw back then, where it was 2 years of nothing, and the price of Bitcoin came down 90%. I don't expect it to be that, because the market in 2014 is very different from the market in 2017 and 18. We didn't have the awareness factor. We had just one exchange that came down and took the whole system down, right? We had very few high quality blockchain cryptos. And now, we've got several good platforms that are going to power industry and adoption of blockchain tech beyond just cryptocurrency for transactions. And so that being said, could we go sideways and consolidate for a few more months? Absolutely. How low do we go? You're asking about worst case scenarios, and I'm a charts guy, and so I look at past precedent, I look at different retracement levels and technical analysis and all that fun stuff. And the two big numbers that I'm looking at is in and around that 5K would be solid support, maybe 4,800, 4,500, in and around there. And then below that, very strong support at 3,000. And so those are the two levels that if this thing really, the bottom falls out, we could see that. Now, right now, we're in the middle of a very strong rally off of the extreme lows that we saw. Is it the low? Time will tell. But for now, it's been a very good rally. And for those that are more inclined to do like active trading and such, which I am, we love these periods of, these extremes because it makes for some very profitable trading. I mean, just in the last week or so, Bitcoin's up almost 50% off the lows. And the altcoins, some of them even more, 80, 90, 100%. And so there's been some good opportunities just in the last couple of days to capitalize on that. Now, the longer term holders, the investors, right, probably won't see, these 100%, 200% gains, really, really quickly here. I mean, I think we need more time before we're retesting the old highs again.
Yeah, no, it's powerful words there. I tend to think that the nature of this bear market is going to scare a lot of people, and hopefully the mainstream won't wrap this up and paint the entire sector as this fraud, this scam. Jamie Dimon was vindicated for his thoughts that Bitcoin was a fraud or Bitcoin was a scam. And I tend to think the actions will speak for themselves. And I believe that the fact that we saw this space grow so much was vindication for people that said, hey, there's a real problem in the banking situation. There's a real problem with fiat currencies and the control of the financial system. And here we had this solution. And the fact that it got that much attention, for me at least, was a vindication and I guess a stamp of approval on the fact that these people were right. So absolutely. I'm looking for a major change going forward here with blockchain.
Yeah, you got to remember, I mean, cryptocurrency and the blockchain technology it's a direct threat to the old, very centralized power structures. Banking, you mentioned, even government, right? When you start thinking about the notion of smart contracts and being able to put law into code and anything that requires trust. I mean, we're seeing counterfeits and that sort of thing being another area of being tackled with blockchain technology and being able to track things through the supply chain. And so there's a lot of really positive uses, but for sure the people that are threatened the most are, the big centralized power structures like government and big banks. And so they're certainly not going to just sit by and let this kind of take over without any kind of pushback. And so I fully expect that. If you've ever read Andreas Antonopoulos' book, The Internet of Money, it's way more than just Bitcoin. I mean, he makes a really compelling case for where this thing could go and why it's a huge revolution, probably the biggest we've seen since the internet.
Going back to what you had said about maybe 3,000 or 5,000 being a really strong support, and your knowledge of being a technical trader and understanding when this money came into the sector, and I guess it really makes sense that there is a strong floor, because this isn't like the stock market, which is already understood. People know it. People trade in, people trade out of it. But in terms of knowledge of the stock market, the general Dow Jones or S&P, everyone's fully aware of it. All investors are. Bitcoin is something that new people were learning about. So it's almost, I almost have to wonder if it's going to trade differently, because it's now a container, a vessel that's been filled that isn't going to empty to a large degree, because it's brand new money that has come into the system.
Yeah, no, good point. And we have over 100 years of history with the stock market and, a decade, less than a decade with crypto. And even then, it's only really the last couple of years. I mean, there's so many names that we talk about, like Ethereum, that didn't even exist a few years ago. And you look at the demographics too, right? The people that are investing in crypto, they tend to be, younger than the demographics that are investing in traditional investments like stocks and mutual funds. And so there's that aspect. But I think you're going to see broader adoption with kind of the more traditional investors. And when you look at the total market cap of cryptocurrency and even just Bitcoin, I mean, it's a drop in the bucket compared to most other investments. Bitcoin's cryptocurrency market cap right now is $145 billion. That's a huge number, no doubt, but there are several companies, that are worth way more than that. And the total cryptocurrency market cap is 400 billion. And so the amount of potential money to flow into this space just dwarfs that number.
All right, everyone. Node Investor. Sir, if you would, please share with everyone some closing thoughts. And if they were to visit your site and your YouTube channel, what they would find, and just give them a little idea of the content that you provide on a regular basis.
Absolutely. So I'm a big fan of the charts, and I love trading and investing. And so that's predominantly what I talk about is, hey, where's the market going? What's it doing here? What to look out for next, some key levels. And I also love teaching people this. So I have some courses on technical analysis, some 101 courses. And this year I'm going to be expanding some of that and doing some more in-depth trading for those that are wanting to be a little bit more active. And so nodeinvestor.com is the best place to find me. I'm on YouTube at Node Investor and Twitter at Node Investor. And that's what I do. I look at charts, I do technical analysis, but I'm also a big proponent in just blockchain technology all around. So I love to share this kind of information and be on interviews with guys like you that are doing this space a really good service here.